Think about the person you love most in the world, not in the abstract. Specifically, the face, the way they hold a coffee cup, the particular version of silence they have when something is wrong. You know this person. You've spent years learning them, their habits, their fears, the things they say when they're trying not to say the real thing. You know their history. You've heard the stories so many times you could tell them yourself. Now here is a question that sounds simple and isn't. How much of what you just described is actually them? And how much of it is the version of them that you built? Because there's a difference. And the difference is the thing almost no one talks about. Picture them sitting across from you at a table. Evening? A meal? The kind of ordinary moment you've shared so many times it doesn't register as significant anymore. They're talking, or not talking, and you're watching them. And somewhere underneath your awareness, your brain is doing something it does constantly. It is filling in. It is taking the fragments of what's in front of you, the expression, the posture, the words, and completing the picture from memory, from pattern, from years of accumulated data about who this person is. And the version that appears in your mind, vivid, familiar, completely convincing, is a construction. It's assembled from what you've observed, filtered through what you've needed, shaped by who you were when you learned each piece. This is not a criticism of how you love. It is a description of how the mind works. The question is, when you reach across that table, what are you reaching toward? Here's what cognitive science has established about how we understand other people. We don't perceive people directly. We build models of them. Mental representations, accumulated from observation, prediction, and interpretation, that allow us to anticipate behavior, understand motivation, complete half-finished sentences. The model is not the person. It's a working theory of the person, continuously updated, but never the same as the thing it represents. This model is extraordinarily useful. Without it, every interaction would require starting from zero. You would have to relearn the person in front of you every time you sat across from them. The model compresses years of experience into something navigable. But the model has a problem. It is conservative. Once it forms, once it decides what kind of person someone is, it becomes resistant to revision. New information that fits the model is absorbed easily. New information that contradicts it faces friction. The mind doesn't want to rebuild what it spent years constructing. So it smooths the contradictions. It interprets the inconsistencies as noise. It sees what it expects to see. Researchers studying long-term relationships have found something that sounds obvious until you sit with it. The longer two people have known each other, the more likely each of them is to predict the other's behavior based on the model rather than based on observation. At some point, and no one knows exactly when, the model starts doing more work than the person in front of you. You stop seeing them. You see who you decided they are. And here is what makes this uncomfortable. The model isn't random. It wasn't built neutrally. It was built by you, with your particular fears, your particular needs, your particular history. Which means the version of this person that lives most vividly in your mind is partly a portrait of them, and partly a portrait of you. The things you noticed first, the qualities you amplified, the flaws you minimized because minimizing them was necessary for the relationship to continue. The version of them that exists in your memory has been edited, not dishonestly, not deliberately, but edited nonetheless, by the person doing the perceiving. There's a name for this in psychology, the confirmation bias applied to people. Once you've formed a strong impression of someone, You tend to seek out evidence that confirms it and discount evidence that challenges it. You remember the times they acted the way you expected. You explain away the times they didn't. The model becomes self-reinforcing. It becomes harder to see them clearly, precisely because you've been looking at them for so long. And this applies most strongly to the people you're closest to. Not strangers. You're still gathering data on strangers. The people whose behavior you've already organized into a story. The people you think you understand. Think about the last real disagreement you had with someone close to you. Not a small friction, a real one, about something that mattered. How many times have you replayed it? And in the version that exists in your memory now, how much of it is accurate record, and how much of it has been reshaped by the story you needed to tell yourself about what happened? The answer, if you're honest, is you don't know. You can't know. Because the editing process is invisible. You have no access to the original. Now think about what this means for everyone in that relationship. While you have been building a model of them, they have been building a model of you. A version of you assembled from their own observations, filtered through their own fears and needs and history. The version of you that lives in their mind is not the version that lives in yours. It is shaped by who they are, by what they noticed, by what they needed you to be. So there are, at minimum, 4 people at that dinner table. The person you think you are, the person they think you are, the person they think they are, the person you think they are. And somewhere in the space between all of those, 2 people who are trying to be known. Researchers studying couples over long periods have found that the accuracy of a person's mental model of their partner doesn't improve significantly with time. You don't get better at knowing them just because you've been with them longer. You get better at predicting the version of them you've already decided exists. Those are not the same thing. And the gap between them, small in ordinary moments, enormous in the ones that matter, is where most of the pain in long relationships lives. Go back to that table. The 2 of you sitting there. There is something happening in that room that has nothing to do with information, something that no amount of time together fully resolves. You look at this person, this face you know better than almost any other face in the world. And somewhere underneath the recognition, there is a distance, a space that doesn't close, not because either of you has failed, not because you haven't tried hard enough, or talked enough, or shared enough, but because of something structural, something that has to do with the nature of consciousness itself. You've been in this room with this person hundreds of times. You know what they order when they're tired, and what they order when they're celebrating. You know which silences are comfortable, and which ones mean something is wrong. You know the version of them that exists in public, and the version that only appears at 2 in the morning when something has broken. You have accumulated so much of them. And yet, there is a moment, if you've been paying attention, when you look at them across a table and feel, very briefly, that you are looking at a stranger. Not in a frightening way, in a true way. The face you know so well suddenly seems unreachable. The person behind it, the actual experience of being them, right now, in this moment, is inaccessible to you in a way that all your knowledge cannot touch. And if you've felt that, the intimacy and the distance at the same time, you've felt something philosophers have been trying to name for a long time. You might be thinking, this is a knowledge problem. The solution is more time, more honesty, more communication. If we just learned more about each other, talked more, shared more, paid more attention, the gap would close. And this is a reasonable objection. It's also where almost every theory of relationships stops. More information, better communication, deeper disclosure. But here's the problem. Information about a person is not the same as the person. You can learn every fact there is to know about someone, their childhood, their fears, their patterns, their history, and still be standing at the edge of the same distance. Because what you've accumulated is a richer model, a more detailed construction. The territory is still not the map. Think of it this way. You know the difference between reading about a place and being there. No amount of description closes that gap. The description is about the place. The experience is the place. Something similar is true of other people. You can know everything about them, their biography, their psychology, their preferences down to the smallest detail, and still never have been inside the experience of being them. This is not a failure of effort or intimacy. It is a structural feature of consciousness. Each of us is sealed inside our own experience in a way that no amount of knowledge can fully breach. The question isn't whether we can get more information. We can always get more information. The question is whether information is what's actually missing. It isn't. Here is what's missing, and it's stranger than it sounds. The philosopher Iris Murdoch, writing in the 1970s, thinking about love and attention and what it means to truly see another person, made an observation that has stayed with me since I first encountered it. She said that the central failure in how we relate to other people is not that we don't know enough about them. It's that we don't look at them clearly enough, not more. Clearly. The difference is everything, because most of the time, when we look at the people we love, we are not really looking at them. We are looking at our need for them, our history with them, our fears about them, our hopes about what they represent. We are looking at ourselves, refracted through them, and the person, the actual person, existing independently, with an interior life that is not about us at all. That person is partially obscured by everything we've brought to the act of looking. Murdoch called this unselfing, the capacity to temporarily set aside the self, its needs, its narratives, its protective interpretations, and attend to what is actually there. Not to what you hoped was there, or feared was there, or needed to be there. To what is actually, specifically, irreducibly there. And she believed this was the hardest thing a human being can do, not because it requires intelligence, or knowledge, or time, but because it requires the self to get out of its own way. And the self is very reluctant to do that. This is not a knowledge problem. It never was. It's an attention problem. And attention, it turns out, is a far more radical thing than we usually imagine. If this question unsettles something in you, that's the point. There's a new one every week. Subscribe to Otherwise Human and share this with someone you think you know. Now, every culture, every philosophical tradition, every religion that has thought seriously about love has eventually arrived at this same obstacle, not from the same direction, but at the same place. The problem of other minds. The philosopher Thomas Nagel, in an essay that has become one of the most cited in the philosophy of mind, asked a question that sounds almost absurd. What is it like to be a bat? Not what it's like to watch a bat, or to study a bat, or to know everything there is to know about bat neurology and echolocation and behavior. What is it like, from the inside, to be a bat? And his answer was, we have no idea. Not because we lack information about bats. We have enormous amounts of information about bats. We lack the thing that information cannot provide, access to the experience itself. To what philosophers call the subjective character of experience, the felt quality of being something, from the inside. The same is true of the person across from you at that table. You can know everything observable about them. You can map their brain, analyze their patterns, record every word they've ever said to you. None of that gives you what it is like to be them, to have their fear in their body, to want the things they want from the inside of that wanting, to be that specific person with that specific history, looking out at a world that means something specific to them, in ways that will always be partly inaccessible to you. This is not a new problem. The ancient Greeks had no word for what we call the self, the bounded, interior, private self, because they didn't yet have the concept of an interior that was fully sealed from others. What we now experience as the fundamental privacy of consciousness, the impossibility of full access to another's inner life, is something human beings have been slowly discovering for thousands of years. And every tradition that has thought carefully about love has had to reckon with it. Simone de Beauvoir, writing about love and freedom and what it means to be in genuine relation with another person, said, "To love someone is not to dissolve the distance between you. It is to be willing to be changed by what you find there, not to close the gap, to stand at the edge of it and keep looking. But here's the objection you've probably been building for the last few minutes. If we're all sealed inside our own experience, if the model is always partial, if even the most sustained attention can't fully breach the distance, then what is a relationship? What are we actually doing when we love someone? Is it all just construction? Just two people projecting their needs onto each other and calling it intimacy? No, and the reason why is important. The model is not the enemy of love. It is the condition of love. You cannot love someone without a model of them, without some continuous, accumulated understanding of who they are. The problem is not that you have a model. The problem is when you mistake the model for the person, when you stop updating it, when you stop standing at the edge of the distance and actually looking. The couples that sustain genuine intimacy over long periods are not the ones who have somehow eliminated the gap. They are the ones who have remained curious about it, who continue to approach the person across from them as someone who still has the capacity to surprise them, who treat the relationship not as a solved equation, but as a continued question. This is not romantic sentiment. It is a description of what attention actually looks like when it's directed at another human being honestly. The person in front of you is always, to some degree, exceeding your model of them. The only question is whether you're paying enough attention to notice. Go back to that table one more time. The person across from you. The face you know, or think you know. The version of them that lives most vividly in your mind. Here is what you've discovered, following this thread. You do not know them the way you know a fact. You cannot. Consciousness doesn't work that way. What you have, what anyone has, is a model that was built with love and time and attention that captures something true and real about who they are, and that will always fall short of the full thing. That falling short is not a failure. It is the structure of the problem, and it is, in a strange way, the source of everything valuable about being in relation with another person. If you could fully know them, completely, finally, without remainder, you would have nothing left to discover. The relationship would be over. What keeps it alive is exactly the distance you cannot close. Simone de Beauvoir said, "To love is to be willing to be changed by the other. Not to understand them fully, not to possess their interiority, to remain open to being altered by the encounter with something that exceeds your model of it. You have never fully known the person across from you, and they have never fully known you. What you have built together, out of incomplete models, imperfect attention, the partial versions you've made of each other, is something more fragile and more significant than knowledge. You've never fully known them. You've only ever loved them into view. If that question stayed with you, share this with someone you want to look at more clearly, and subscribe to Otherwise Human. New episode every Saturday.